Good morning, y'all. We are back with another edition of DNVR Rams Live, presented by our friends at Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off your first order. Got a loaded show for you on a gorgeous Friday morning. I think it's going to be hot as hell today, basically everywhere across the Front Range. So if you've got some outdoor activities, maybe get it in earlier in the day. I'm going to definitely try and squeeze some yard work in at some point if I can get all my work and responsibilities done. You got to get the bills paid before you can, have a little bit of fun. We're going to talk about all kinds of stuff today. We're talking CSU football recruiting. We mentioned it a little bit at the end of yesterday's show, but there is a big time visit happening this weekend. The top local recruit for the state of Colorado. We'll talk about him. We'll talk about how that 2026 class is shaping up. At this point, we've talked about most of the guys that have committed, but obviously we're going to keep you informed as all of the new information rolls in. I'm going to, at the second half of the show, talk about Phil Steele's preseason All Mountain West teams. I actually don't have the full magazine yet, but the preseason all conference teams always get leaked out earlier because the teams release them. I think if you pay for the digital version of Phil Steele's magazine, you might have access to the whole thing by now. It's definitely something that I pick up every year, so we'll probably be talking more Phil Steele at some point over the summer, but I'll just kind of get into what stands out about his 4 preseason all-conference teams. We'll talk about the CSU guys and what maybe is significant about who is included, who is omitted, all of that fun stuff. At the very beginning here, we are going to talk a little bit of Nique Clifford. We're going to play a clip here. Good morning to everybody in the Toyota chat rocking with us. If you wouldn't mind giving us a thumbs up on YouTube, I certainly would appreciate it. Our guy Taylor in the Toyota chat says, J-Mike trying to plan a flight around December 6th. The last 3 between CU and CSU on the court have been 6 or 7 p.m. Do you know if that's the case again this December? Unfortunately, we don't know what the tip time will be yet for that December 6th matchup between CSU and CU at Moby Arena. If I had to guess, on a Saturday, it would likely be between 4 and 7 p.m. I guess you do technically have the possibility of like a 2 p.m. start. A lot of that is going to be dependent on TV. If it gets picked up by, one of the more significant partners, then, there's always the possibility of it being a little bit of a later tip. But given that it's a Saturday, generally speaking, you're going to be in that Saturday afternoon window for a local matchup between 2 programs. I'll actually kind of give a couple of thoughts on that here in just a second as well. But I promise you guys, as soon as I am able to get that information, I'll make sure I get you guys that out there and, see if I can help you plan this trip. Definitely could be a fun weekend. Potentially, I think that could be the weekend of a Mountain West championship as well. So maybe a really big weekend, maybe not that eventful. We'll have to see a little later on down the line. I want to open here with a clip. This is from the All NBA podcast, which is hosted by Adam Mares of DNVR Nuggets, as well as Tim Legler of ESPN, which is pretty cool. Legs is certainly one of my favorite basketball personalities. He is one of the few people left at the mothership, as Dan Patrick refers to ESPN, that still is just all about ball. I think he's so insightful. Every broadcast with him on the mic is such a treat compared to so many of the other broadcast options out there. But they had Fran Fraschilla on, and Fran is a college basketball expert, does a lot of games nationally for ESPN, is somebody who, for a national guy, is pretty locked into the Mountain West. I certainly appreciate that. He's mentioned CSU a couple times over the years. I know he came to a couple of practices, like during the Roddy era. So he's somebody who has his finger on the pulse when it comes to Mountain West basketball, and most certainly when it comes to the NBA draft process. He gave a couple of thoughts on Nique on the All NBA show the other day, and actually compared him to Tyrese Haliburton, which, if we're talking about timing, that's not bad for the CSU star. Not a bad time to be compared to Tyrese, who's obviously had a really awesome performance in the NBA Finals. But here's that clip of college basketball expert Fran Fraschilla talking about Nique Clifford and why he likes him as an NBA prospect.
Who are some of the guys in the back half of the first round that you think could contribute to winning basketball in year one?
Tons, Adam. Kid in your backyard, Nique Clifford at Colorado State. He's a Colorado Springs kid. Started at Colorado, ended up at Colorado State. He's kind of like he's almost a clone of Tyrese Haliburton. 6'6" point guard, can shoot it, athletic, probably a little more athletic than Tyrese. He comes to mind immediately.
I love that. I posted that on X last night, and unsurprisingly, got some snarky responses. Admittedly, my eyebrows raised when you referred to him as a point guard, which I don't think he is going to be at the next level. He's not going to be a true point guard most of the time. But what I pointed out online is the premise of his comparison is sound. When you look at their body types, athletically, stylistically, I understand what he's saying. He's an explosive guard with some length who can put the ball on the floor, who's a great shooter. I would say that Tyrese has more of a dynamic handle. I think he's more likely to put the ball on the floor and create something for himself than Nique is. But we saw Nique make a pretty tremendous leap when it comes to that element of his game these last couple of years. In particular, this past season, what he was able to do as a spot-up shooter, what he was able to create for himself on the mid-range game, some of those baseline shots that he made with consistency. I mean, they were tough. Some of them are fadeaway. Some of them, you're having to create space out of nothing. And he really displayed pretty phenomenal touch and tremendous shot-making abilities. I think playing with Isaiah helped him grow there and just kind of understanding. I'm not going to necessarily be able to do everything, but if there are a couple of spots that I can get to with consistency where I know that I can shoot it at a high clip and I can, tend to create a quality look for myself in those, parts of the court, then I'm going to do that. And I'm going to consistently attack. And I just thought Nique's growth as an offensive player was so significant. I published a feature, which I implore you to go all check out on DNVR.com, kind of diving into how Nique went from being somebody who was averaging 5.5 points as a junior at CU to a guy who basically scored 20 points a game this past season at CSU. And you always knew the explosiveness, the athleticism, the defensive abilities. One of the things that I quote in there from Ali Farouk-Manesh is early on in the process, while they weren't entirely sure what Nique was going to be, he even said they weren't 100% certain that Nique was going to start, which is pretty crazy to think about. But it makes sense. I mean, at that point, you still had Jalen Lake, who was coming off of a really intriguing, first couple of years in the program. They had signed Josiah Strong, who was another veteran wing that they were really high on. And based on what Nique had shown, late in his tenure at CU, I do think it's fair that there were some question marks coming in. Like, this wasn't a can't miss situation. And looking back, it's pretty amazing how this all came together. I think it's a testament to Nique's maturity, his willingness to take a hard look in the mirror and understand that even while you do believe in yourself, I mean, he always thought he was an NBA player. He always intended to test the draft waters this past spring and the spring before, regardless of what anybody thought about him. But he had the intelligence and the maturity to recognize I still need to improve if I want to get to where I am. And while I like the position I'm in, there's room to go to that next level. And there was a great quote from Ali in it. I should have put it in my notes instead of paraphrasing here, but it essentially was talking about Nique and why he believes in Nique's ability at the next level, and more than the explosiveness, more than the defensive versatility and the ability to switch 1 through 5, the closeout speed, the ability to shot contest, the way he can get to the hoop vertically, his shot making. More than all of that, the reason that Ali believes in Nique's ability to have success at the next level is that mentality and that maturity. Because while you have to have basically an ignorant level of confidence in yourself to get to the NBA. You just do. Like the level of athleticism in that league, like the audacity to believe that you're actually going to make it. It's unreal, but you have to have that absurd confidence. But it's having that confidence while still having the wherewithal and the ability to take coaching and take criticism and look at the areas you need to improve, especially coming into this year. Like it's not an easy situation as somebody who'd already been in school for 4 years, who has NBA aspirations, who knows wholeheartedly that he's an NBA player. It's not easy for a guy like that to take the feedback and then come back to school and be willing to do the little things. And it's just so impressive what Nique has done these last couple of years. He very easily could have declared last year and still probably would have got drafted. I'm not sure it was a guarantee, but he's probably a fringe second round pick at that point. To go from that to basically a guaranteed first round pick, likely a top 20 pick, and potentially even the program's first ever lottery selection, it's pretty incredible. And it's just, like I said, a testament to his maturity and his work ethic and his competitive drive. And I'm just really excited to see what he can be. And I know that was kind of a long-winded tangent there, but going back to where this all started with the comparison to Tyrese Haliburton, obviously, year one, Nique's not going to be playing the type of role that Haliburton has for the Pacers right now. And you wouldn't want him to. I mean, if he was even having the role that he had for CSU, that's probably not a great spot. That's also probably an indication that he didn't land on a very good team, which you don't want for him. I do think he is somebody that can contribute right away. And while I don't think he is going to be a true point guard at the NBA level, he wasn't even really a true point guard at CSU. If you go back and you look at those offensive sets, in the 4-out, the 5-out sets that CSU runs pretty consistently, there were a lot of times where he was de facto running the point. He's facilitating everything. He's creating offensively for everybody else. Cayenne was actually better as a catch and shoot guy when Nique was facilitating. I just think people get caught up in the semantics. Like, I'm not surprised that I got a bunch of snarky replies. That's not true at all. He's not going to be a point guard. He's more of an off-ball player. I do agree that he is going to thrive as an off-ball 3-and-D guy that can stretch the floor for you, that's going to thrive with catch and shoot opportunities from the perimeter, but can also, drive on you and get to the rim. Like, all of that is true. But I think one of his strongest selling points as a prospect is that he has that in his bag, the ability to put the ball on the floor, to get to a spot, to create a quality mid-range look for himself, to get to the hoop, or, to dump it off to somebody else, because I do think he is underrated as a passer. And I think especially he got to show those skills this past season without Isaiah Stevens in the mix. And I just keep coming back to what a huge benefit it was to Nique to get that opportunity to play alongside Isaiah Stevens. I'd say the same thing about Roddy. Like, Roddy and Nique, for physical reasons, are better NBA prospects. Isaiah is one of the savviest, most intelligent basketball players I've ever covered. There's not a doubt in my mind that if he's 2 inches taller, he's a starting point guard in the NBA. And I still think he has an opportunity to play his way into some role on the roster just because he is so skilled. But Nique and Roddy, obviously, you saw it from the beginning. The potential, the ceiling was always going to be really high because those guys physically are just different than most people that have come through CSU. And I just would be shocked if Nique was not able to have a pretty substantial career. There's so many factors that play into that. Health, what type of franchise are you on? Is it a disastrous scenario? That's not going to help your development. Are you being put in a box? Are you being forced to be in a role that doesn't maximize your skill set? Kind of like the situation he was in at CU. I think his growth the last couple of years has been incredible. And while I understand that he's not going to be a true point guard, at the NBA level, I do think that Fran's assessment is spot on, and I understand what he's saying, just in terms of the versatility that Nique brings offensively, his height and size, and again, like, I just don't really understand why people get so fixated on the semantics of, oh, he's more of a small forward than a guard, or what does it really matter? The responsibilities in 2025, 2 through 4, especially on the offensive side, are all going to be very similar. Like, defensively, if you're playing more of the 4, you're probably going to be in the post more than somebody who's out along the perimeter. But so much of basketball is 4 out and 5 out these days anyways. It's kind of irrelevant. Like it's really about the skills you bring to the table. And if you want to dive into semantics, like Jokic is the Nuggets point guard. Obviously he's a 5, but he's the point guard in terms of the way things are being run offensively. I think if you're hearing Fran call him a point guard and that immediately, sets off alarms for you, you're kind of thinking about basketball through outdated terms. Yeah, I just thought it was cool to see Fran give him that type of love. I'm really high on him. We'll keep talking about this. We've got some great comments here in the Toyota chat that I want to get to. Great to see you guys. Let's take a quick break real quick. We'll come back to this. Let's shout out a couple of our partners, though. All right, we've got a lot of new partners on the show of late. One of those is Cake Mortgage. Cake is the business owner's home mortgage partner. One of the things they specialize in are non-QM loans. If you're a regular employee of a company, you get a W-2 and your income shows on your tax return. Traditional lenders love this because it's simple. It's more complicated for business owners. By maximizing legitimate business deductions and expenses, business owners can reduce their taxable income and keep more money in the business. This means that their tax return shows little income. Most lenders don't understand this type of complex income, so they get denied for home loans and refinancing. Cake can get business owners approved by validating your cash flow through bank statements, certified profit and loss statements, or business tax returns. This is good for all kinds of people. If you're a creative professional, someone like myself who's worked as an independent contractor, great option. Maybe you're a tech entrepreneur. Maybe you're founding a business, a freelancer. Maybe you're somebody who is, big into hunting and you're killing and selling meat or something like that. Head to the link in the podcast description to get started. Cake Mortgage Corporation, equal housing lender, NMLS number 1734623, licensed in Colorado by the Division of Real Estate. Terms and conditions apply. I also want to talk to you guys about Mando. It's sweaty season. Like we said, it's going to be about 100 degrees today. Get that deodorant up, boys. You got to do it. I know there are some folks that are kind of earthy and whatnot, and I'm not going to do that. It's a natural smell. Yeah, it's a natural, terrible smell, and your smelly self is going to ruin everybody's vibe. Don't be that guy. And what's cool about Mando is not only is it going to keep you good under your arms, but this is whole body deodorant. Your pits, your balls, your butt, your grundle. If it's a stench zone, Mando is going to get you covered. They've got great scents, all geared towards men. Bourbon Leather, Cloverwoods, Mount Fuji, Pro Sport. It's awesome. Check out that Mando starter pack. It's a great way to test out some of their products. Not only are you going to get solid stick deodorant and cream tube deodorant, but you're going to get to pick a couple of free products of your choice. Mini body wash, deodorant wipes. Check it all out. You're going to get free shipping as well. As a special offer for our listeners, new customers get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code that equates to over 40% off your starter pack. Use that code DNVR at shopmando.com. That's SHOPMANDO.com. Please support our show. Tell them we sent you. Smell fresher, stay drier, boost your confidence from head to toe with Mando. We've got some great comments rolling in the Toyota chat that I want to get to. Mark says, I'm probably way off here, but could he be a smaller version of Nuggets era Aaron Gordon? I don't think you're completely off base there, particularly with the way that he's going to be able to rim run. You put him with a true point guard or someone like Jokic who just understands, spacing and passing. I could totally see Nique, particularly on the offensive end, being an Aaron Gordon type. Defensively in the post, I don't know if you're going to want him on, like a true traditional 4 or 5 very frequently. And I do think that AG can be a small 5 at times, kind of like a Rashawn Bemba at CSU, but far more explosive and versatile offensively. But I see what you're going for there, and I do think he could be. I think he'll shoot the ball with more consistency. But I mean, AG's his growth as a 3-point shooter the last couple of years has been tremendous. That's not a comp I would have thought of initially, but I do think in the right system, I see what you're going for. Shout out to my friend Austin White. Love to see it, buddy. We worked together at the Collegian in school. He does a great job covering the Portland Trail Blazers. He mentioned need the Blazers to pick him up at 11 and link up with Chauncey Billups. From a Colorado sports story standpoint, that would be pretty cool. He's already played at both major, universities in the state. Now he could, kind of develop under the Prince of Park Hill as a Nuggets fan. Any of those scenarios where he ends up in the West kind of makes me be like, ugh. Portland, Minnesota, Oklahoma City. I think all those are good opportunities for him, good franchises as well. But I think it'd be a pretty cool story. And I do think that 11 to 15 range is probably the more realistic early range of the first round where you could see him going. But I would love to see that. And shout out to my guy, Austin. We got to get you on the show here. We can reminisce on our days back at CSU. We're old fellas now, old heads, as the kids say. To kind of put a bow on all this, because I know we've got a lot to get into in this show. I keep coming back to one based on Fran's comp. It's funny he compared him to Haliburton, because I think Indiana is about as perfect of a fit offensively as you could hope for somebody like Nique, just with the way they push the pace. I think his athleticism, his ability to attack in transition would be big. And then you also have a couple of guys there that are going to, take some of the defensive attention. And if Nique's getting matched up on teams, third, fourth, fifth best defender, I really like the possibility of what that could mean for him. But just imagine if CSU had signed Nique Clifford in 2020 originally. It all worked out the way it should in the end. Like, he's going to be a first-round pick. He's been really classy the whole time. He's never taken shots at CU for running him off, which is what happened. I mean, they recruited over him. They brought over Cody Williams, which I understand he was a top 10 prospect in the country. Like, I can't say that I don't understand the logic of what they were thinking. The thing is that was based on a broken version of Nique Clifford who had been mismanaged and misused for 3 years. They stuck him in the corner. With all due respect, and I say this as somebody who loved covering Adam Thistlewood, they kind of treated him like he was a Thistlewood type player, just somebody who's going to stand in the corner, come in and crash the boards a little bit, but shoot some corner threes. They didn't act like he was an athletic freak, and that's what will always confuse me. As soon as he committed to CSU, I hyped it up about how it's just going to completely transform his game when you put him with a true facilitator like Isaiah Stevens. It's exactly what happened, and not only on top of that, Nique was able to grow individually as well as a, shot creator, as an offensive facilitator, somebody who can put the ball on the floor and make something happen. But I mean, if he signs with CSU and he's on that 2020, 2021 team with sophomore Roddy Stevens, Tanjay, DT, and then, James Moore's got into the rotation that year after redshirting as a freshman. That team went 20-8. They were the third team left out of the field in the NCAA tournament. Got to remember that was the weird COVID year where they're playing, 2-game series in the same building. Everything about that season was wonky, but they were pretty good anyways. They made the NIT semifinals. If Nique's in that rotation, taking some of those minutes, does that team, make the tournament? And then now all of a sudden it's, 4 tournaments in 4 years. It's fun to think about. There are a lot of reasons why things could have gone differently. Like, if Nique's in the mix, does John Tanjay have the type of ascension that he's had these last couple of years? Probably not. But man, that would have been crazy had they been able to make that happen, and had they been able to sign him. And I give Nique so much credit for being classy and taking the high road and not punching down and not doing the, I'm going to pound my chest, look at everybody. They doubted me. This is what you get. He's just always been like, things happen on God's timing. And I had to go through that experience at CU to ultimately be the type of man that I am today. And he's just such an easy kid to root for because he has that mentality. And I really think that aside from the success that CSU's had, which has most certainly opened up the program to a different caliber of player, to a different level of athlete than CSU traditionally had, for a decade plus there. I think the biggest reason that they've had so much success is just they know how to recruit the right type of guys. It's not just about talent. What's your personality? What's your work ethic? How are you going to fit inside the locker room? And they have done such a stellar job of finding guys that have incredibly high ceilings as basketball players, but even higher ceilings as human beings, because they're just good people. And, I think if you could learn anything from the Medved / Farouk Manesh line of thinking, it's that sometimes we're going to let a guy walk, even if his potential is through the roof, because we don't like the type of cultural fit that he's going to be, particularly in the portal era, guys coaching for their job. And coaches are on shorter leashes than they've ever been. Like, we see guys get fired after a year or two all the time. So I get why a lot of these coaches are willing to take a gamble on some of these, I don't want to say problem players, project players would maybe be a more accurate way to say that, like guys that are projects that need to, work on some things for whatever reason didn't work out at their old school. I get why people are willing to take those gambles, but if it's all you do and all you're looking at is, 4-star, 5-star, and you're not really getting to know them as a person, you're not going to set yourself up for success. And again, I just keep coming back to the staff and the work they've done on that front and how impressive it is. Kind of wrapping up the basketball portion of the pod today. If you missed it, CSU will be hosting CU on Saturday, December 6th. Do not know the tip time yet. We addressed that earlier. They'll also be in the Battle for Atlantis. That'll start Thanksgiving Day or the day before Thanksgiving, depending on when the 3-day tourney starts. Good field. St. Mary's, South Florida, Vandy, VCU, Virginia Tech, Western Kentucky, and Wichita State. My only comment would be there's so many quality mid-major brands in there. It almost limits what you can do from a scheduling standpoint in the non-con, because like St. Mary's, VCU, Wichita State, those are all teams that would be very realistic targets for CSU to have in the non-conference schedule, but you're not going to do that because then you run the risk of potentially playing each other twice. They also announced the home and home with Loyola Chicago over the next 2 years. We don't know the date yet either, but CSU will play at Loyola Chicago in 2025 against Drew Valentine in that program. Then they will host the return game the following year. Love that quality home and home, exactly the type of programs you should be scheduling in the non-conference if you're CSU. Winnable games, but games that if you lose them, they're not going to murder your metrics or anything like that. And they come with a little bit of a brand name visibility as well. Loyola Chicago and their run in the tournament a couple of years ago, Sister Jean. I think it's a little bit more of a high profile matchup where it's a little bit more of note than, I don't know, like a lower level WCC school or something like that. Like, obviously if you're playing Gonzaga or St. Mary's, that's a different conversation, but Loyola Marymount or San Fran or something like that. Like, I feel like Loyola maybe has just a little bit more brand recognition with the average college basketball fan. If you're a college basketball sicko, all these schools, you understand the WCC is high skilled basketball, great competition level, all that stuff. But yeah, that's just a couple of thoughts on that. The last time CSU played Loyola was in the Cayman Islands Classic back in 2019. David Roddy wasn't even starting at that point of the year. He was still coming off the bench, gave the Rams 10 points off the bench. Kendall Moore and Adam Thistlewood actually starred in that 61-60 victory, hit a combined 6 threes and went for 29 in that game. People forget just how important Kendall and Adam were just from a stability standpoint those first couple of years under Medved. Nico and Chris Martin, some of those guys that were around before were huge as well. And I've got nothing but respect for the way that those guys handled a really tough situation coming off of the disastrous end to the Eustace era. We don't need to get into all that stuff again. You guys remember the deal. But, I mean, Adam and Kendall, they didn't hold up over the course of their careers. Injuries impacted both of them pretty significantly. But they were really important from an establishing the culture standpoint. And honestly, those guys could play too. Like, for being underclassmen, they were pretty crucial in that 2020-2021 year. Their roles kind of decreased as the years went on, and Isaiah really elevated, and Roddy and Tanjay and even like DT, those guys kind of took over. But that's what you would have hoped for. The first class kind of comes in, helps you smooth things out, and then they found more success and started recruiting a different caliber of player. But shout out to Kendall Moore, shout out to Adam Thistlewood. Maybe forgotten in the conversation of some of the better CSU players the last couple of years, just because we've had so many great guys come through, but they had really nice careers in their own right. And, like, they're kind of like the Jalen Lake of that early era. Not quite that, because I would say Jay Lake's a better player, but I think you get the point. We're going to shout out a couple of our partners here. We're going to keep it rolling, and then we're going to talk Phil Steele's preseason all Mountain West teams. But let's shout out those partners. I want to talk to you guys about the Hall of Fame app. We've all been there. Your parlay is one leg away. Some relief pitcher gives up a walk-off bomb in the 9th or the 11th in the Rockies case yesterday. Just when I buy in, just when I tweet about them being fun, they get walked off in the 11th, blow a chance to pull out their first 4-game sweep in like 6 years. But if that situation sounds familiar, the Hall of Fame app is built to fix that. Started by 2 lifelong sports fans who happen to be Ivy League grads. Hall of Fame makes parlay research smarter, faster, and data-driven. It's not your buddy's group chat full of hot takes. Hey, tail me on this 6-leg parlay. It's a full-on analytics engine. The app gives you access to advanced stats, historical data, and powerful tools to help you bet smarter. It's built for the everyday sports fan, so it's nice and easy to use. Whether it's the MLB, NBA, NFL, NHL, or college sports, the app gives you beautiful charts, clean visuals, real insight, not hype. Maybe the best part, when you've built your parlay in the app, you can send it straight to your sportsbook with one click, no manual entry, no wasted time. It syncs automatically with major sportsbooks like DraftKings and FanDuel. For a limited time only, our listeners not only get a 7-day free trial, but they also get 50% off their first month when they use that code DNVR at checkout. Just download the Hall of Fame app on iOS and Android or visit hofbets.com, enter that code DNVR, and you are all set. Whether you need snapbacks, fitteds, beanies, or tees, Branded Bills has you covered with your performance and style. If you're looking for some gear to make your brand stand apart from the crowd, Branded Bills has you covered with the best custom headwear. Start your order, and their dedicated team will help you create the exact custom apparel you need. We're actually about to get some custom DNVR stuff through them, which is going to be really cool. They have a partnership with Colorado State as part of their campus collection. They are sending me a couple, which I'm really excited about. Going to be rocking them a lot. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off your first order. Shout out Branded Bills, our presenting partner. Joey B says, Justin Michael, the next gen grill master. I'm more like a grill apprentice at this stage of my grilling career, process. I'm confident on the cheeseburgers, brats, hot dogs. If it's something simple, chicken, I've got it. I've got into some squash, some stuff like that. I feel like the next level, though, is steak. I haven't gone big yet. The last time I did a steak, I just pan-seared it and threw it in the oven. And turned out delicious. It was incredible. And I was really proud. But also I was kind of like, you coward, like going full, what is his name? The actor that plays the Green Goblin, William Dafoe. The grill was calling to me and I didn't answer it. He says, does JT make the all preseason grill masters list? We need a grilling update from JT's patio. We'll get some grilling content this weekend. I didn't know that people were so invested in my grilling journey here. But now that I'm 30, now that I'm settling into middle-aged life, I feel like it's the move. Like I love it. I love mowing the lawn. I love all that stereotypical suburb shit, and I'm not even remotely embarrassed about it because that is my personality. That's me, and it's a lot of your personalities as well. So it makes sense why you tune in. I've got a lot of love for Denver. I'm not one of those like anti-city people either. Gorgeous city, ton of culture, a lot of fun stuff to do. The lack of parking, sometimes the dirtiness, but mostly just the parking and the traffic. It drives me insane. I could not deal with it. I'm a suburbs dude through and through. And I'm just thankful to be in Northern Colorado because I get to, still come down and cover the Avalanche and do some stuff in the city, go to the bar. But I get to be around this incredible community, and I get to cover CSU, and I get to be around football and basketball and all the things that I love, and I get to engage with all you guys, which never gets old. But getting back on track here, big season obviously coming up for CSU football. Like I said in the beginning, Phil Steele's preseason All Mountain West teams have been released. If you go to Nevada Sportsnet, they posted the entire image. I didn't end up putting it on the screen because they highlighted all the Nevada folks in yellow, and I just kind of felt like it was going to get a little confusing here. There are 10 Rams in total that made the preseason all-conference teams. Phil Steele does 4 teams, which is more than most outlets. Nobody from CSU was represented on the first team, which been a while since you could say that. Probably had first Adazio. No, they still had Trey, so Trey was always going to be on an Adazio team. But there are 10 people total, which is up there. Fresno had 10. There's a lot of San Diego State, Fresno, CSU Boise representation. Hawaii actually had pretty decent representation as well. I think they had 8 players over the 4 teams. But kind of going through it here, like I said, nobody on the first team. On the second team, starting left guard Tanner Morley. Not surprised at all. He's somebody that I think will be first team all conference this year, at least on one of the all conference teams. O-line can get a little bit wonky based on who's voting and if they're actually watching the games or not. But Morley's a stud. He's going to be one of those guys where after this season, I think we better be ready to have the checkbook open because he's going to command some pretty decent interest, but he should. He's a stud. Aaron Karras, starting right tackle, makes the second team all conference as well. A nice nod of respect for him. He's a guy who's developed behind the scenes last couple of years. Kind of came into the O-line rotation last year, will be the starting right tackle this year. Really excited about him. Believe he went to Pomona originally. So a Colorado kid, was committed to sign with Jay at Nevada, ended up signing with CSU as part of that first signing class. And I've talked about this a couple of times, but both Karras and Tanner Morley are perfect examples of what you want to be as a program when it comes to the offensive line. You want to hit on your guys in the trenches, maybe more than any position but quarterback. Like, you've got to be able to sign and develop your own guys there, because if you are dependent on portaling it every single year, it's going to be really hard to build a quality offensive line with any type of consistency. It takes time. You need reps together. You need to develop continuity, and it's just hard to have the necessary rapport and chemistry as a unit when you're trying to come together in a couple months before the season. And then all of a sudden you get thrown into the fire, and when things start going bad early, that doesn't tend to help. So I just think the fact that CSU has been able to hit on some of these kids that they've signed and developed and have come up through the ranks, and there's about to be a couple of other guys that you learn here in the next couple of years. It's all really intriguing, and I've loved the work that they've done when it comes to recruiting offensive linemen. I think that's one of the things that CSU's recruited best under Norvell. Bill Best does a great job from a talent evaluation standpoint. Even some of the guys they've ultimately missed on and have signed elsewhere, when you look at, some of these kids from Cherry Creek and Valor and wherever that have ultimately ended up at Iowa State and USC and Kansas State and some of these bigger programs, like CSU was their first offer, usually by a pretty substantial gap too. So they know what they're looking for. They're going after the right type of guys. And when they get to campus, they're developing them and putting them in a position to succeed. The fact that you get a couple of offensive linemen on the second team, yeah, you'd love them on the first team, but essentially Phil Steele is saying CSU has 2 of the top 10 offensive linemen in the conference going into the year. I do think that's encouraging, because obviously, you lose some guys that have played a lot of snaps for you the last couple of years, and Henderson and Gardner and Moss and all those guys were great, but there is going to be a little bit of unknown in the trenches going into the year. So I do think it's encouraging that Phil Steele's that high on some of these offensive linemen. He has Jaquez Evans, second team all conference. If I had to say anybody got snubbed, he'd probably be my biggest snub. I guess if I'm going to do that, I got to look at who he has defensively and see if I can make an argument against them. He has Jaquez Evans listed as defensive end. He's going to be more of an edge rusher, but again, semantics, kind of going back to what we talked about with the basketball conversation. He has Trey White of San Diego State, who's a stud, and Jaden Virgin Morgan of Boise State. I would have put Trey White and Evans. That's who I'll have, I assume, on my first team all conference list. Media days is in about a month for the Mountain West, so we should be voting on that here in the coming weeks. It's something I take very seriously. I'm not going to just half-ass do an all conference team on the podcast today. I know the preseason ones matter far less than the actual teams at the end of the year, but I do think if you are somebody who is privileged enough to be a part of that process, you should take it seriously, and it does matter to these kids. So do the research, put the work in. Definitely some subtweets in that statement. We'll just say there have been some people over the years who just very clearly either pulled up the Phil Steele book and just went copy paste, or frankly only watch their team. And again, if you are privileged enough to be on that panel, take it seriously. Do your job. Jaquez Evans is going to be a stud. If you want to say he's the 3rd best edge rusher in the league and not top 2, that's fine. It's not worth, pounding your head on the table over or anything like that. But physically, that dude's a freak. He passes the eye test. He's nothing but muscle. And oh man, that's such a dangerous comparison. I was going to say, like, it wouldn't surprise me if he had a Shaq Barrett type impact for the defense. I don't want to put those type of expectations on someone, especially coming off of injury. But I do think that he could be someone that is very effective as a pass rusher, whether that be a Shaq Barrett type or, Corey James was a stud for a couple years. Like, I just think he is going to make a living in the backfield. And he kind of reminds me of those guys more than Mo, I think you could classify as a defensive end. There were times he was an upright edge rusher, but to me, he's more of that like Shaq Barrett, Joey Porter, Corey James type, where it's like you're kind of an outside linebacker, but you're also kind of just a pass rusher. You're not like a 2005 outside linebacker Lance Briggs type, but you're also not, like JJ Watt. It's kind of interesting how that whole position and that element of the defense has evolved over the years. But I'm very high on Jaquez Evans as the point there, and I think that he'd be the guy I would say should have been, on the first team, and I would argue it pretty exhaustively. Isaiah Hankins makes the second team. Baylor transfer at kicker. I think you can make an argument that Hankins is the most important addition of the spring. Like Evans, a lot of these guys were huge. Then they went out and they got Paul Tangelo, and then they added some depth in the interior. I like a lot of who they brought in, especially after that, especially in the spring portion, coming off of spring ball. I just thought they did such a good job of addressing their needs, but I was pretty worried about the kicking situation. Noyes had been a stud these last couple of years, and to go from that to what we were seeing in spring, I was just like, I don't love this situation. The fact that Phil Steele's high enough on him for him to be labeled as the second best kicker in the conference going in, that's exciting. And obviously I haven't had a chance to see him in person yet, but it matches what we saw on tape. They have the San Diego State kicker listed as first team all conference. Would not surprise me if Hankins ends up being first team himself. He has Lloyd Avant, the Tulsa transfer running back, listed as the second team kick returner, which is an interesting dynamic. Can't say I saw a ton of that in the spring. I know he was back there returning some kicks. That's probably straight from a conversation with Jay Norvell, though. He actually had Lloyd Avant on his fourth team as well as a running back, which was really interesting to me because if I had to go based off of my gut, he would be the third back in the rotation behind Dupree, who everybody knows I'm incredibly high on. I think he's an all-conference caliber back. On Justin Marshall, who's somebody who's been proven the last couple of years, very productive when you can get him in space, when you can, take advantage of that speed. He's got good vision and stuff too, but also somebody that wears down a little bit just as a smaller back. That's not a shot at him or anything like that. I just think he's more impactful as a change of pace running back, give him 12 to 15 carries a game, maybe not even that, 10 to 12. And then you can, really lean on somebody like Dupree or Avant as that more bell cow type back. I think all of them are going to be in the mix one way or another. I think they might even try and get, Keegan Hollis on the field. And, who knows what happens with Van Shield. That's kind of a wild card for me. I'm guessing more of a special teams guy this year than what we saw a couple years ago. But the fact that Lloyd Avant is this prominently featured in the preseason, interesting to me. And I do wonder, is that assumption on Phil Steele's part? I mean, you like what he did at Tulsa, and you look back at the high school film especially. I mean, he was a very productive player. Or is that because Jay Norvell is telling him directly, like, no, we really like what we landed in this guy, and maybe he takes a bigger role than someone like Justin Marshall. I mean, it's still on the table at this point. I think all those backs are going to be prominently featured. If I had to put my money on one guy who I was like, this is who I feel confident he's going to be, one of the top 8 running backs in the conference, it would be on Jalen Dupree. But that's just based on what we've seen so far. Like I've only gotten to see Lloyd in a couple of spring practices. I liked what I saw, looked the part physically. As a pass catcher, I think he might be more dynamic than either of the guys, and maybe that's a path to playing time for him that could kind of be an extension of the run game anyways, some of the quick screens and swing passes and whatnot. But interesting. I thought that was one thing that definitely jumped out to me. He has Braden Fowler-Nicolosi listed as the third team quarterback. He also has Owen Long, third team all-conference linebacker. I'm really high on Owen Long. I think he is I think he's going to be a star. Like, I think he's going to have 100+ tackles this year. I think he's somebody who can be disruptive in the backfield, but he moves well enough sideline to sideline to be disruptive in pass coverage. The instincts, I love everything about his game. Really glad to see him make it. Braden Fowler-Nicolosi, we talked about it the other day when Nevada Sportsnet did a QB tiered ranking, basically, and I think they had BFN like 7th or whatever it was. I mean, they had him below a ton of guys. That just made me scratch my head. If you want to say, like Phil does, that Maddox Madsen's going to be first team all conference, whatever, that Boise offense is going to be really good. I would argue that their run game is going to be a bigger deal, with Sire Gaines, and then they bring over the kid from Fresno State. I'm drawing a blank on his name right now. He has Walker Eggett, the San Jose State starting quarterback, as his second team all conference quarterback. They're going to throw the ball around, so he should put up some stats. I would say Braden should be second over Eggett, considering Eggett couldn't even win the starting job definitively over Emmett Brown last year. It was kind of a 2 QB ordeal that was really weird. Eggett throws a nice ball. So much of their offensive success through the air last year was dependent on Nick Nash going up and making plays. Lockhart had some nice moments as well. Another guy that used to play for Norvell at Nevada. But from an arm talent standpoint, it's not close. Braden definitely clears those guys. But this does kind of reaffirm what I said, that even if you are a harsh vocal critic of Braden, and I think there are a lot of people in Ram Nation that are overcritical, I would argue at times. There have been moments he certainly has dropped the ball and has needed to be better. But I argued this for like 20 minutes a couple weeks ago, so I'm not going to do the whole thing again. But even if you are a really harsh critic, when you look across the league and you see how many unproven dudes it is at quarterback, like logically, at worst, he is the third worst quarterback or third best quarterback going into the league or into the season this year in the league. Like, I don't get some of the hyper criticism that he faces. Like, yes, you'd like to see more, but I feel like people it's like they overlook a lot of important context when it comes to the numbers and stuff like that. I'm not going to do that whole rant again, but an opportunity for Braden to potentially improve his draft stock this year, and to kind of solidify himself as the most talented quarterback in the conference. Again, like, I think Maddox Madsen runs that offense perfectly in Boise. I also think a lot of guys can do what he can do when you have that type of run game, and you're going to be able to just create really easy throws for yourself and play action and just build off of that run game. But Madsen made some plays in the playoff. I don't have beef with him being first. I would just have had Braden on the second team over Eggett, but again, like, you can go back and forth. I don't think it's that big of a slight or anything like that. We're going to keep this conversation rolling here. We do have to shout out 2 more partners before we get out of here, so let's go ahead and do that. Trucks have always been a part of Toyota's DNA. For generations, Toyota's built durable legends destined for greatness and perfect for Colorado. Whether you're conquering off-road trails or hauling the weight of the world, there's a Toyota truck that's right for you. Check out the Tacoma or the return of the iconic Land Cruiser. Toyota offers 17 models with available all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive like the Epic 4Runner. They also offer more low and zero-emission vehicles combined than any other automaker to give customers numerous choices to reduce their carbon footprint. 16 hybrid vehicles to choose from. Check out the Tundra iForce Max hybrid truck. Not to be outdone, though, Toyota SUVs take command on the road and on the trail. It's what makes them the perfect vehicle for Colorado. If you're cruising Cap Hill, going to be perfect. If you are going over, Vail Pass and I-70, also going to be perfect. Toyota is a proud partner of CSU Athletics and the official vehicle of DNVR. Toyota, let's go places. Coors Light encourages you to never lose your chill. Life's going to test you each and every day. There's going to be something that potentially, gets a rise out of you. And as a hothead myself, I can tell you it never, and I mean never, helps the situation when you lose your cool. Almost guaranteed to make the situation worse. And that's why I've been working on it. Like, this is genuine from me. Obviously, it's an ad and whatnot, and I'm trying to play along to the themes, but this is real life. Like, I am a hothead, and I'm always working on it. I'm trying not to lose my cool when some troll hops in the Toyota chat. I'm trying not to let it bother me when some dude trolls me on YouTube for months on end. Like, you've got to do the little things, take a deep breath, go outside, go for a walk. I love doing anything with my dog. It's such a refresh. And whatever you need to do that for yourself, you got to do it. You know, when you're chilling, when you're cool, when you're kicking back, then crack open a Coors Light. But make sure that you choose chill. When the mountains turn blue, cold as the Rockies, Coors Light is cold lagered, cold filtered, and cold packaged for a smoother finish. Make the most out of the times you choose to chill and choose Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door. Visit CoorsLight.com/DNVR. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. Mark in the Toyota chat, kind of going back to what we were talking about there, has the raised hand emoji as a harsh vocal critic, but he says you are still right about Braden being a top 3 quarterback in the league. I mean, it's really less about him and more about the rest of the field at this point. Like, but I do, again, like I've long argued that people are a little hypercritical with him. But on the 4th team, Lloyd Avant in the backfield, he has Armani Winfield listed, which is interesting. Armani missed the spring with some injuries. Had moments where he really flashed last year. Had the touchdown against UTEP. That was coming off of a couple of drops too, which was encouraging. I think he's someone that they didn't quite figure out how to consistently get him the ball. I think Armani has room to grow too as a route runner and just with some of his consistency and stuff like that. I think that was an issue with the passing offense in general last year. Not only did you change the scheme and you were being less aggressive down the field vertically, particularly after Torrey went down, I feel like there were some instances in the intermediate game where the receivers did very little to help out Braden. Instances, the guy's not coming back to the ball, drops, and it's not any one individual's problem either. Like, you know, I had said the same thing about Caleb Goody. I said the same thing about Vince Brown. They all had moments where they flashed. It was just, you needed more consistency. And obviously Armani is somebody who is a very highly touted high school recruit. From an athleticism standpoint, you get it. And if he were to pop this year, I think that would be great for CSU's offense. If I were to guess on who the most productive receiver this year will be, I would put my money on Jordan Ross. Just think he's the real deal. I think him and Braden have got good chemistry, and I think he's just kind of in line to have a really big year. Now, I've said a couple of times that I don't think it's going to be a Torrey Horton 90 catch, 1,400 yard type season for any of these guys, and that's a good thing. They're going to be less dependent on any sole individual to carry all the weight of the offense, and it's going to be more spread out. It's going to be closer to that like 2016 CSU offense. And they still had Michael Gallup, but you know, BC was a big part of that. They got the ball to Dalton Fackrell a lot at tight end. You know, they had multiple running backs who were prominently featured. It wasn't like you could just shut one guy down and that was it. And at times that's kind of been a struggle for CSU. So encouraging that Phil Steele's high on Armani. We need to see him make that leap. Finally, last but not least, he has Dylan Phelps listed as a 4th team cornerback. Phelps may be overlooked a little bit in the spring because of all the transfer portal additions. You know, they bring in Blocker and all these guys. And I think they're all intriguing. And I think they needed to really improve the athleticism in the secondary. But Phelps was one of those guys defensively that I really wanted CSU to hang on to. Like, it sucks losing Newer and Kershke to Wake Forest, don't get me wrong. But if I had to pick 2 guys that I really wanted them to hang on to, I would say they got 2 of the 3, which is Dylan Phelps. I'm really high on Lorich, but Owen Long, somebody, like I said, who I think is going to be a star. Hanging on to those 2 was big. You know, again, like would have been nice to see a couple of those vets stick around, but I also think with what CSU did in the portal, you're not really going to feel those losses too much. But Dylan Phelps has got good length. I thought, particularly like in the red zone and you're matched up one-on-one, there were some instances where he was really locked down on a couple of key plays on some of those wins last year. I had a really good game. I think it was the New Mexico game off the top of my head where I was like, all right, this kid's the real deal. But great to see that, you know, a lot like we said with the offensive line, you're going to have to lean on the portal to fill in the gaps of the roster. But you want to be able to have some homegrown talent. And if you're not developing kids, you're never going to be a contender or a competitive program with any type of consistency. Joey says Colorado State football odds are more or less than 6 wins. Surprised at that. I think it's set pretty unsurprisingly. There's some wild card games that I think really flip it either way. Washington State, UTSA in particular come to mind. There's a lot of like Wyoming, Fresno. What are you going to get in those teams this year? Even like a UNLV. I don't think it's crazy. I would have maybe set it at 7. just based on the fact that they have 7 home games. But as Joey says in the Toyota chat, 8 to 9 wins is very doable. It's a matter of, can you go out and do it, though? We shall see. They did it last year, but the schedule is not going to do you quite as many favors this season. Mile High Minute says, thoughts on the Monty show? They've been very vocal during this conference alignment with the Pac-12 and Mountain West. I don't want to comment on a show I don't listen to. I do know that they talk about realignment a lot. I'm not sure how accurate they've been through this process or anything like that, or what type of sourcing they have. I'll check it out, though. I'll check it out and see if there's anything worth kind of diving into on the show. Before we get out of here, I did want to give just a recruitment update. Thought we would get to it earlier than 55 minutes into the show, but you guys know me, I'm a rambler. CSU Football will be hosting, let's go for my second attempt at pronouncing this. Tufanua Ionatana Umukai. That's my best guess. 4-star defensive tackle at a Cherry Creek High School, the #1 recruit in the 2026 cycle coming out of Colorado. On 3 gives CSU a 25% chance of landing him. Somebody else was 25%. I think it was Washington. In my opinion, would be the most significant local recruit to sign at CSU since Trey McBride. He's the real deal. You watch him eye test physically. I mean, he's just eating double teams, uses his strength to his advantage, but he's quick off the snap, good leverage. Like, there's just so much to like about him. And he's a great offensive guard too, like primarily being recruited on the defensive side. But worst case, I think you could always just flip him back to the offensive side of things, and then he could potentially be a starting guard for you, And I just think if CSU could land him, it would be huge. He's somebody that I think could play as a true freshman. The size, you can't teach that type of frame, but really passes the eye test when you watch him on Huddle. Jaden Hernandez is also going to be visiting this weekend. He's a Sac State commit at the moment, Long Beach Poly High School tight end. We'll see. Maybe CSU is able to flip him. The fact that they already have a couple of tight ends committed could hurt your cause there. That's why I wasn't surprised Kai Wesley, who CSU hosted in May, had been recruiting heavily, ultimately committed to Baylor. I just think once you land a couple of tight ends at that point, it limited the likelihood of him ultimately getting on board. The most recent commits that CSU's had, Atticus Tillman, who we talked about a little bit yesterday, 6'2", 170-pound safety out of Arvada West High School. Good production, 11 PBUs, 3 interceptions last year, 40 tackles. Runs well. He's somebody who I think should translate pretty well in this Tyson Summers type of defense. Devin Hamilton, we did not talk about him yesterday. 6'4", 200-pound wide receiver out of Mill Creek High School in Georgia. I believe he was at Marist High School in Illinois prior to that. But 18 catches for 215 yards and 4 touchdowns listed on Max Preps last year. I'm not sure how accurate those are, though, because when you watch his Huddle, I feel like I saw him score more than 4 touchdowns. He's fast in the open field. He is being recruited to play wide receiver. I can confirm that. Reached out, confirmed that with the staff. I saw some people on social media, I think it was the Outlaws of Moby account, said he might be being recruited to play linebacker, which is not a bad guess because that is a very popular method for CSU at linebacker. Basically everybody they've signed these last couple of years wasn't just a traditional high school linebacker. It was a skill position guy who's freakishly athletic, and you can teach him how to play the linebacking position. But I can confirm Devin Hamilton, 6'4", 200 pounds out of Mill Creek, is being recruited to play wide receiver. Fast in the open field. The first play on his Huddle is him just dusting a bunch of DBs on a quick screen out wide. I call that the classic Demarius Thomas screen, especially being a 6'4" guy, 200 plus pounds. It kind of looks like DT in the open field. I love receivers like that aren't cute, that move well, that carry their weight, but they're going to put their foot in the ground and they're going to get upfield. And you better make a tackle or get the hell out of the way, because, I'm 6'4", 200 plus, and I'm coming, down the tracks like a freight train. And he's just got a lot to like in that element of his game. Should, be a very natural fit with what CSU likes to do in the passing game. Soft hands, aggressively high points the football. You love that. Sometimes guys are hyper athletic when you're watching their high school film, but they're not necessarily using great technique. They're just leaning on their athleticism. He's got really nice hands. You like what you're seeing there. Good instincts as a route runner as well. A couple of instances where the quarterback extends the play. He reads the situation, finds a way to get open and make a play. You love that. Sometimes that's something that takes receivers a couple of years to develop. You like that he's already showing those instincts in the high school level. But this 2026 class is really coming together nicely for CSU. Really intrigued by the guys that they have on board. I think it's going to be pretty well-rounded by the time it's all said and done. Obviously, we still have a half year until the early signing period, so a lot can happen between now and then. And most certainly, a couple of guys will decommit. That's just how the process works these days. But you might be able to get your own diamond in the rough late in the process. Like Owen Long was somebody they got on board right before signing day a couple of years ago. Now I think he's going to be one of the best defensive players on the team. It's easy to get carried away with all this stuff. But just remember, it's supposed to be fun. It's just recruiting. It's not that deep. Before we get out of here, that John Gruden video on social media was pretty cool. It was even cooler that he actually flexed social knowledge of CSU, and it wasn't just him opening it up, a 30-second video for social media. I mean, there's an Al Bubba Baker reference in there. He's talking about working out Crockett Gilmore, how Trey McBride's the best tight end in football. I'm sure he looked all of that up and had some of it spoon-fed to him as well from Barstool interns. But it was a cool exposure opportunity for CSU. I understand that. I'm jealous. I really want one of those boxes that he got with all the sweet gear. If you've got any TV show, movie, book recommendations for me this summer, please send them my way. About to finish Big Bang Theory for the first time. Unsurprisingly, I found it way funnier and more relatable at 30 than I did at 20. I've never been able to finish it before. This time I thought it was funny. Tire season 2 was awesome. Huge Shane Gillis fan. Really feel like the show found its stride in season 2. Character development was on point. I think they've got some runway here in terms of longevity with how they've set things up. But really could use some new shows, could use some new music. I feel like I've listened to the same Mac Miller, Sturgill Simpson, Pearl Jam rotation for like 5 years. I listened to a lot of Blink-182 as well. But yeah, always looking for suggestions, open to anything and everything. Shout out to everybody for supporting the content. So much love for everybody in Ram Nation. Thank you for listening to the DNVR Rams podcast presented by Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off your first order. Much love, y'all. Always proud to be. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.